Hello, thank you for joining me again as we have another study. This time I want to be looking at Daniel, both the book Daniel and the man Daniel. And I hope that in the end we're going to come to the conclusion that Daniel and his three friends were not supposed to be compromising themselves to the culture of their day, and nor should you and I be compromising our faith and lives to the culture of our day. We're looking at something that happened in the 6th century BC when Nebuchadnezzar conquers the southern kingdom of Judah, in particular Jerusalem, and then gives orders that they are to be bringing some of the young men. This would be probably between the ages of 12 and 18. He's supposed to find some young men who are healthy, they're good looking, they're smart, they can learn quickly, and they're to be brought to the king's capital there and trained, and they'd be brought up in Babylonian culture and Babylonian literature. Now, some people would say that this is because they're being held hostages, that their fathers or other ancestors or relatives, whoever it might be, that might want to start a revolution would slow down if they realized, hey, our sons are going to get killed for this. Let's not do that. Hostages is quite a possibility, a part of the idea. But I think it's much more than that. I think you could also say by having these men there and converting them to Babylonian from their Judaism, we are taking away the potential leaders of any future generation. We're kind of eliminating that whole nation and enlarging our own instead. I think there's something even more to it than that, though. I think by taking these young men, we're trying to subvert them into the Babylonian culture so they don't even think themselves Jewish themselves. They're not trying to be traitors, they're just trying to be loyal to their new group. So when you see Daniel and his three friends in chapter 1 being taken off into captivity, they're not going to some slums somewhere in Babylon. They're being taken to the good part of town and being trained under the tutelage of the king's own teachers. And so they get new names. And we know his friends now as by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel himself, his Hebrew name is Daniel. God is my judge. But he has been given a different name, Belteshazzar, which means Baal, protect the king. And so they want to change their names, change what they read, change everything about them, so these young men will no longer think of themselves as Jewish, and then with their children and grandchildren, eventually they'll be absorbed into the Babylonian country. I think that's what was going on and what they had to resist. And indeed, Daniel and his friends took their lot in life. This is where we are. We're going to live here. We're going to do our jobs. But they did not give up their faith or intend to be buying in wholeheartedly to a culture that is anti the true God. So we have here in chapter 2, as he's part of the wise men of the kingdom, that the king has himself a dream one time. And he calls in most of his wise men and says, boy, this dream, it scared me, this dream. I would like you to interpret it for me. So tell me what my dream means. And they said, sure, tell us the dream and we'll tell you what it means. He said, you tell me what I dreamed and then you tell me what it means. And they say, nobody can do that. Nobody can tell you what somebody else's dream is. Well, you tell us and we'll interpret it. He says, no, I think you're a bunch of phonies. I think you'll all just be killed for this. We'll do that tomorrow. I need help with this. And so word gets out, and finally somebody takes it to Daniel. And he says, wait, is this for real? And he's told, yes, the king's going to do this. He hurries off to Nebuchadnezzar and says, could I have a little time? Because I think maybe my God could answer your question. I want to have some time to ask him. And so the king says yes. This thing he saw, he wants to understand. Go for it. And so he hurries off to tell Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we all got to pray all night, guys. We got to find this out. You be praying. I want to have the same dream he had. And Daniel gets the vision. And so he can go to the king the next day and says, calm down, everything's okay. I'll tell you what you saw, and I'll tell you what it means. And so he explains to him the statue from my title of Lions and Statues and Fires, oh my. And the statue is this huge statue, and it has a golden head, and it has silver arms and chest. It has a belly of bronze, and down through the thighs, and then the legs are iron. The feet are part iron, part clay. And the king's thinking, that's exactly what I dreamed. And he says, then along comes the interesting part where all of a sudden there's this rock cut, but not by human hands. And this rock is going to come and hit the statue right at the feet, and it's going to just smash up that clay and iron thing, and the whole thing's going to topple, and then this rock is going to get bigger and crush all the thing and become as big as the world and take over. And the king says, great, what does it mean? And he explains, well, there's one kingdom, yours, it's going to be followed by another and another and another, and then God is going to come up here. The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. And so, boy, your God really is the God of gods and Lord of lords, a reveal of mysteries. And so he becomes in favor with King Nebuchadnezzar. And we'll find that Daniel's spending his life there from his adolescence to his death. And so we have Daniel here serving Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius, Cyrus. They go through a number of kings, but they keep the wise man the whole time. So we go forward 3 chapters, and now it's Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son. And in chapter 5, he decides to have a party. I'm the king. I want to have a big party. He invites 1,000 nobles, and he's got the wives and the concubines and other people coming, and they're having a gay old party. And he says, we're going to one-up it now, too. Instead of the regular old cutlery and everything, we're going to bring in the stuff that was from the Jewish temple that was dedicated to their gods. They bring in these goblets, gold and silver goblets, and they want to drink wine, and they toast the gods of gold and silver and stone and etc. They're gods. They're toasting their gods with our gods' goblets. And then it happens. All of a sudden, the people in the room, king in particular, sees this big hand come and start writing on the wall. And they can't deny what they're seeing. This huge hand is there, and it's written in plaster. Try writing in plaster sometime. But there it is. We got these 4 words on the wall, and the king is so frightened. Scripture says his knees knocked together. If you wonder where that term came from, it's from Daniel in the Bible. So the king calls people in and says, what does this say? These 4 words, I don't understand this language. I don't know what it means. Somebody's got to tell us. Obviously, there's a God that's trying to get us a message here, and nobody can do it. And so while there's nobody present at the big old party, his mother comes in. And his mom says, hey, your dad had this wise man who really could understand some of this stuff when it came to that a God might do. So they bring in Daniel. Daniel looks at the 4 words. He says, yeah, I can tell you exactly what it means. And so he says, we have mene tekel uparsin. And mene means measured, numbered. And so we have it there twice because we did a recount, and you know what? Your days of reigning are over. The next word is tekel, and tekel means weighed. You personally have been weighed on the scales, and you personally have been found wanting. And peres means your kingdom is divided. We're going to give to somebody else. And so all of a sudden we don't have Babylonian kings anymore. We have the kings of the Medes and the Persians. That this bigger kingdom, well, maybe with 2 kings, one in the east, one in the west. And sure enough, that night we have Belshazzar, who is murdered. His kingdom comes to the next in line, Darius. Now, in the next chapter, chapter 6, we find Daniel and the lion's den, hence my comment about lions in my title. The royal administrators were having a problem because Daniel's becoming too important. And so Daniel is going to stay faithful to God, and they say, we can't find anything wrong with this guy. Why don't we, let's do it with his religion. And so they trick the king into signing an edict saying nobody can worship any god for 30 days. They can worship the king, but that's it. And his ego allows him to sign this thing, a law that cannot be retracted. Anybody who's going to break this gets tossed into a den of hungry lions. And so Daniel is going to continue on praying, and they spy on him, catch him, and he has to be thrown into the den of lions. And as you might remember the story, the king realizes he was tricked, and he's sorry he's about to lose the best guy he's got, and at least that's what he's told. And so in the morning he hurries over and they take the lid off. Hey, Daniel, has your God saved you? And he says, hollers up and says, yeah, I had an angel down here all night holding their lions' mouths shut. So they haul Daniel up, and then the king decides, those guys that were trying to trick me, toss them in. And bring their wives and kids too. And so these men are tossed in, and Scripture says none of the bodies made it to the floor before the lions broke their bones. So we have God protecting his own. And that's going to be the case. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of people suffering a lot, but still, God can reach in there in the deepest, darkest spots of this world where oppression is great and hatred for God and good is strong. Well, we're still going to have a God who is God. So I'm going to go to chapter 7 here now, and we have here a picture of beasts. Lion and bear, a bear, and a leopard, iron teeth beast that they can't quite describe. We got all these things going on. What's going on? And he isn't able to interpret what these are. Finding out from God that we've got one after another of these kingdoms coming, but God has a plan for history. And Daniel, you can't understand it all because you live now, and some of it won't happen for a long time. But we're going to have the enemy coming. He's going to speak against the Most High and oppress the saints and try to change things. But we're going to find out that God is going to win in the end. In chapter 8, we're having another vision. And here we have a ram and a goat. And the ram represents the kings of Media and Persia. And Daniel's told that the goat represents the king of Greece, in this case, Alexander the Great. And part of the criticism of Daniel by some scholars is that that Daniel is too accurate in his prophecies. There's no way somebody from the 6th century could have known about all this stuff, so obviously it was written later. Now that might be some excuse you have for some things like Alexander the Great, but then he writes centuries later about the Romans or something. So people are desperate sometimes to try to somehow prove the Bible wrong and wanting not to believe in the miracles or a God who has power to tell us about things. But the critics would want to do that to us. And they also, in criticizing Daniel, would want to criticize about some of the language used. That some of the things that he has, the stories or the words used, sound a lot more like 2nd century than 6th century. So obviously Daniel wasn't written then. Let's say it was written here instead. Because it obviously is copying some of these other stories. And I'm thinking, that doesn't prove a thing. Maybe Daniel was written, and these other guys wanted to copy a style that seemed to work pretty good. So I don't think that worked too well either. The third proof that some scholars might say that Daniel is too new and it shouldn't be considered where it was, is because we don't have any outside evidence that there was a guy named Daniel. We haven't found it somewhere else. And so it didn't happen. Somehow let's discount it. There's no outside evidence. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. We've got Ezekiel here from the 6th century, and he mentions a man named Daniel who was very wise. If you're going to accept Ezekiel, why are you going to discount this? Though some scholars would even go so far as to say, oh, that wise man Daniel, then that was probably a different guy. If you're determined to not see God in action, you'll probably succeed at not seeing God in action. I don't want to go without mentioning also our fiery furnace for Daniel's 3 friends. As I mentioned, we got an Eastern Kingdom and a Western Kingdom. Daniel's over in the headquarters over here. They're serving over here. And over here, it isn't the lion's den. Over here, it's a fiery furnace. And the rulers over there, the wise men, are trying to supplant Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they're saying, let's trick the king over here into building the statue. And everybody's got to bow down whenever the music plays. And so that way, if they won't do it, then we will have them executed. That we'll have them thrown into a fiery furnace and burned alive. We have people trying to figure out ways to get rid of people, and so you'll find some stubborn Jews that won't do it. And obviously Hitler found the same thing, that they're going to stay faithful no matter what, even unto death. And so these men are caught not bowing when the orchestra plays, and so they're hauled off to the king. These guys won't do it. Okay, guys, please, just bow down. We'll have the band play one more time. You get one more chance here. All right? And then you'll have to bow down and worship, because otherwise I have to throw you in a fiery furnace. And they say, no, we're not going to do it. The king says, I'll turn up the heat, and there's no way you can be saved. No God will be able to save you. And they say, King, our God can save us. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down to your statue or to your false gods. And so they get thrown into the fiery furnace, and the king watches this happen. The soldiers that are taking them down to throw them in, they all die of the heat before they get there. But the men fall in, and they start walking around. And they're still alive. They're walking around. The king says, how many guys did we throw in there? And they say, well, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, 3. And they said, how come there's 4 guys in there? The 4th one, he looks like the Son of God. Come on out, guys. When they come out, only 3 come out. And these guys don't even smell smoky for having their time in there. Our God can save us. And we can bear witness in our day. We shouldn't be surrendering to the culture in which we live. Daniel is also giving us a view of the future. When he has some dates here, he's taking notes on things. When's all this going to happen? What's going to happen? Because you can follow the dates given by Daniel and do the math and find out, when Christ is going to be born. Just do the math here. And some people say, oh, you're adding up wrong. You're imagining things. Well, I imagine pretty good because I can do the numbers, okay? As we look at it, we find some people wanting to resist that God has sent a Messiah, resist that God is going to see a day where Antichrist is going to oppose the church, and the church can stand up to it. And that's when I want to come back to where I said at the beginning. You and I are living in a day when the church is being challenged. A lot of people stopped going at the time of COVID for one reason or another. Some people are afraid to go and say certain things about it because if I sound too churchy, I might get under attack. Somehow I'm going to be opposed by scholars, or I'm going to be opposed because I said something contrary to a lifestyle like the practice of homosexuality. I'm not enough of a woke culture. Somehow or other, I'm supposed to surrender my faith to the day of whatever somebody else wants to tell me to live by. And as Christians, we should have a Christian worldview, and I should not be subverted to something else. I should not compromise myself or my faith to the culture of the day. And neither should you. God bless you.